quickly as I can so that we are able to say so much explicitly within a shorter time. We can have a bit more expanded version and discussion like we agreed on. So the next topic we're looking at for our problems of philosophy is the problem of free will versus determinism. And we can expand this and talk about so much, make it relevant to science and etc. But we want to make sure that no matter how we talk about it, we're able to highlight the key things that are of interest to us as philosophers and in the context of moral responsibility. So I've titled it Free Will, Determinism, and the Question of Moral Responsibility. The outline quickly tells you to try to have a very crisp understanding of determinism, the problematic implications that arise from that, and then immediately we point out how that will lead to the denial of free will. We look at two versions of determinism, and then we see the sense in which one may think of indeterminism as, free willism. Some disagree. If you read widely, they think that even depending on your understanding of determinism, indeterminism may not necessarily be compatible with free willism. But that is when we want to expand the discussion even further. We can do all in one. So for now, when we say indeterminism, then we think of it as being a good, compatible, partner with free willism. A challenge for indeterminism, and then we'll do some conclusions. What should be your quick understanding of the term determinism in the context in which we are using it? When we say someone is a determinist, crudely speaking, a crude term, it means a person thinks of or subscribes the view that all things are causally conditioned, such that they could not have been other than what they were. Keyword, causally. So what brought it about? If you have any effect, says the determinist, it was as a result of certain antecedent causal features, if you like, that generated that effect. So it couldn't have been other than what it was. If these antecedent conditions were there, then they will necessarily cause the effect. And that is how come the effect is generated. So the effect was determined by the causal conditions prevailing, And so if you're a physicalist, if you give a scientific interpretation of that, then certain effects that you see can be attributed to the mental conditioning, the physical brain conditioning of a person, whatever. If this is how our setup is, then a certain effect necessarily follows. So it's deterministic. Okay, that's a crude way of looking at it. We want to look at that in the context of moral responsibility. Look at our topic there. There are problematic implications for such a conception of determinism in the moral context where we are talking about ethics, right, wrong, good, bad, and we have a certain understanding of causal conditioning leading to effect, then we may not be able to hold people accountable, because if everything is causally conditioned, that will include our will to act. So our willing and our choosing would also be, determined by certain antecedent conditions. If so, then if I didn't choose to will, I didn't choose to choose, I was compelled to choose by such antecedent conditions as the determinist argues, then how do we hold anyone accountable for their actions? How do we praise or blame? It seems to lead straightforwardly to denial of free will, and therefore seems or suggests therefore that morality is empty, of course, so to speak. Okay. Now, what I have just outlined a moment ago is what is captured in the next slide. When I say you shouldn't have, you should have. both expressions suggest that you have the ability to do other than what you did. I say you shouldn't have talked back at your mother that way. It means, it suggests that you had the ability, the capacity to have done differently, and you didn't. So when I call out a blame or a praise, I say, oh, that was really great. That was a good thing you did there, helping that old lady with her luggage. If I were determined, supposedly in the sense in which you are presented it, to act that way, then it doesn't. Do you tell the thermometer that wow, this is an excellent thermometer that is able to tell the temperature of it? That's funny. It is a thermometer. It must do what it is conditioned to do. It couldn't have chosen to do otherwise. It is when a gentle being, supposedly able to do contrary to what he did, chooses without compulsion to do differently, that we either praise or blame. That's the assumption grounded morality. And so if we argue for determinism the way we've done, then we may have the challenge of denial for the essence of morality. Very simple. Okay. So if I do not act, look at the highlighted portion on your screen now. If I do not act and choose freely, is it meaningful then to hold me responsible for my actions and inactions? But immediately there is we have an uneasy, how do I put that? We feel uneasy about something. Look, because if someone, God forbid, knocked down another person while driving because he was texting whilst driving, we would think that he could have chosen otherwise. But if someone, God forbid, got a brain seizure or convulsion of a kind and wiggled his way, unfortunately, into the water and is drowning, we wouldn't say, why did you choose to drown? Look at the two scenarios. We will hold the driver who was texting whilst driving accountable. We'll say, you shouldn't have. For the other person who maybe because of a health condition in his physiology, wiggled his way, got an attack, and then wiggled his way into the water, we will feel pity, generally speaking, I think. Of course, someone will say, what if the person knows that he shouldn't go near water because he has this condition, blah, blah, blah. If he went there, they won't feel pity. You die. The person went there, even if he or she went by the water side against instruction. You will still feel pity because the assumption, there we go, is that getting an attack, a seizure attack, is considered less within your control. It is as if the person couldn't have chosen otherwise, compared to the driver who is texting whilst driving and has knocked down someone. What am I trying to show? So we may not be able to accept wholesale the determinist argument when it comes to moral claims. And so on your screen, we say, what if the person was forced? Are there instances where people are dragged? So think of the seizure, which led the person to fall into the water and is drowning. Okay. Or someone who may have a condition, psychological one, that could come if he or she doesn't take her drugs or even takes the drugs but has a seizure, so to speak. Compare that to where the guy is so embittered because his team was scored and he lost his bet, and so picks a gallon of petrol, picks a lighter, and goes to the park where the people are celebrating and spreads the petrol, then lights it up to burn people alive. And then you say that, well, it was causally conditioned by how he felt. Hello, these are two supposed causally conditioned scenarios, one of which we think the person can be held accountable morally. The other one, we may feel less compelled to hold a person accountable. This is what is going on. So when do we determine that people are accountable? And when do we say, no, it was outside of antecedent condition, it was an antecedent. When do we say an antecedent condition gave rise to the effect, causally speaking? And when do we say that the causal antecedent notwithstanding, the person could have chosen otherwise? So when is a person forced by causal conditions to act in a certain way? And when is a person not forced? It wasn't a force. There might be compelling reasons, but not forced, to act in a certain way. It's over to you, my dear student. But there we go. Do we punish a patient with cancer, or we try to treat or heal the cancer? We don't like the cancer, but we can tell that it is as a result of an antecedent condition that the effect is the way it is. So the scenarios I've given you should show you the point. You can read through the slides. Okay. Desiring to starve, and torture children can never be, excused on the grounds that it is as a result of a certain upbringing that you got, which has made you anti-child, anti what? You don't like children. So we should think that that is an enough justification. Maybe we interrogate it a bit more. There we go. So there are two types of determinism as I present them here, in a way that you can easily distinguish it. The hard determinist things that there are external factors, your upbringing. Look at your screen, but the slides are with you as well. Okay, so you can look at it, your upbringing, your education, environment, genetic structure. All these are not something you chose, says the hard determinist. You see that? Is the core of determinism is the hard one. I think that's so we can't morally blame you or praise you, whichever way you go, because the choice you've made, the will that made you choose, you have chosen, but the choice wasn't a free choice. It wasn't as a result of a will that is free to choose. External factors like these conditioned your choice. Okay, if you extend the argument. The self-determinist thinks otherwise, that your actions are influenced by antecedent conditions, yes, but they are within you. So there seems to be a certain sense of accountability because it is you have chosen to have such inclinations, such attitudes, such character. You chose to, excuse my French, like women with big butts. So you went to see somebody with that, and you close your eyes, you looked at it and looked. It is an internal inclination that you have. So if you allow that conditioning within you to dictate to you, then you are accountable. So the self-determinist is trying to accept determinism, yes, but still make room for moral responsibility, because the assumption is that the actions, the choice are all inspired by what? Internal. Not something that was outside of your control, but it is something within you. So you got angry, and that is why you slapped the gentleman. Just the anger that you had is what caused your slapping. But that is something you, so internal to you, could have control. If you didn't, yes, we accept that it is the anger that led to the effect, but you are accountable to an extent. This is something like what the self-determinist is trying to do, make room for possibility of moral accountability, and yet accept that everything is determined anyway. Now, we ask a question, what if the action was unintended? Where we can clearly, so I gave two scenarios. The guy texting while driving, and the one, so it has led to the killing of someone on the stretch there. Then someone who got a seizure, and so whilst wiggling himself falls into the river and drowns. Or I want to say, you can think about something. Now, for one, we feel pity. For the other, we feel no. You could have chosen otherwise. Because for one, there seems to be intentionality. Or better still, let's look for one that is so clear intentionality, like the betting guy who leaves home calculated. And I like to do the scenario with David in class. Takes the man's husband, David in the Bible, takes the woman's husband, gives the man's death sentence to him to go and give to the commander on the field. And kill it. Took days to calculatively think through it and do that. You can say that it was conditioned by anything. It was calculated. There is intentionality. So the lawyers, the intending lawyers amongst you, those who intend to be lawyers or pursue law, you will see that there is manslaughter and there's murder. And you see where these are coming from. Intentionality. When we're able to establish that there is the intention to kill, and it doesn't even lead to killing, it's more dangerous than the one who killed without intention. The person didn't intend to. Outcome was that he killed. Intention to steal from the state. The intention can be more dire. And so Abraham didn't kill the son, Isaac, physically, but the intention was so clear that if you're a Bible type, you will see he didn't have to kill the son. God already said you have sacrificed him because it was so clear, the intention. And we can go on and on and on. Jesus says, if you saw someone and you lust after the person in your heart, you haven't touched the person, you haven't done anything, but in your heart, you have already committed that illicit affair with the person. Why? The intention. We can go on and on and on. So where there is intentionality, we have reason to say that no, moral responsibility cannot be, checked. Where it was unintended, and this is the difficulty, limited human beings, finite. How do we measure intentionality? We can only approximate and look at. But people can be smiling with you, and yet in their minds they are so angry at you. What do you use to, So when we are asking the people to slow down with passing judgment, no matter how obvious it looks, allow for time, let the wheels of justice grind slowly, because sometimes in interrogation and in interaction and allowing matters to lie, the case is a bit more clearer, than this abrupt, I saw him doing this, therefore I have evidence and I'm going to pay back. It doesn't help intentionality. Now, our question is, does self-determinism reduce to high determinism after all? Some think so. The distinction didn't survive, a long time, says William James and others like that. He doesn't think there's any reason to say one is hard and one is soft. He thinks the soft will ultimately reduce to the hard, like I already queried. The hard determinist says conditions outside of the control person, external to the person, are what leads to what their choices, the will that generates the choice, and therefore those choices are not free. The external, your upbringing, don't choose your mother, you don't choose your father, you are brought up. But then when you grow up, you are able to decide otherwise. Just that your decision to go contrary to what has been given to you is itself inspired by how you were groomed. Very difficult. What you call food, what you call right, what you call chaste, purity, holiness, are all inspired by upbringing. Very, very strong argument the socialist and the psychologist and a social scientist make about how the external inspires. So your likes, your dislikes, look on my screen, please. Your desires, attitudes, which are supposedly internal, and so the self-determinist says they are internal to you, so you are accountable for what you want to like. I use the very funny example that is student friendly. You went to like a woman with that size of a back, and that created problems for you. Therefore, you are accountable, so to speak. He says the self-determinist. Now, the hard determinists can argue that that like is inspired by your upbringing. It's inspired by the where you grew up, what you consider right or wrong, which are all external to you. So the external factors inspire and direct, and to a large extent dictate the internal, factors. Therefore, you cannot say that it is my attitude that led to that. My attitudes were inspired by external forces. What does that mean then? Then all determinism be determinism, so to speak. There isn't any soft one and hard one. And if they are all hard in that sense of it, all inspired by antecedent conditions external to the person, then it means, back to our earlier argument, it will be difficult to morally hold people accountable. We are not talking legal. The law may take the person in and retribution or correction or what have you. But we are talking about the morality of it. We say, oh, it's so unfortunate. Oh, this brother has gone to, kill someone on the road because he was texting. That is what the hard determinists will say. It is as a result of factors outside of their control. Of course, if we stretch the matter, it's not every determinist that will consider texting whilst driving as well a deterministic, whatever. Depending on what you mean by determinism. That's why I said if we want to do everything, we won't finish. We have to carve an area in the discourse and clarify. So we have defined what we mean by determinism now. We are working with it. The physicalists could say that if your eyes are not on the road and you are looking down on your phone whilst texting, it will determine the outcome. You see the sense in which you are using determinism. It will determine the knocking that either you yourself somersault off the road or you hit someone. In that sense of it, the outcomes were determined by the antecedent conditions. Good. Now, William James, I already mentioned him. He's a free willist. After diffusing the supposed difference between soft and hard determinism, he tells the determinist branch, all of them together, that you create problems for us in determining our actions, morally speaking, if we go by determinism. So he's anti-determinism. You may want to call him a free willist. Some say indeterminist. What does he say? He argues that morality is a fact. Society is grounded on morality. Can you imagine what the rapist would say if we went to determinist? Well, it was determined to be, so it couldn't have been otherwise. You get an A, and the instructor says, I think it's an F. And you say, oh, please work the math well. I got 82 here, 90. He said, oh, it's determined to be this. How? We have a problem. So the people said, no, chill, guys. Morality is a fact. It supposes that our will is not determined. Rather, our will is free. That is where we get the free will from. You made a choice from a will that is free. That also has a problem. We are philosophers. Is it every time that your will is free, you choose freely from your will? Who chose to be born? Freely chose to be born. Freely chose to be male or female at birth. I'm not talking about where you go and decide to cross carpets. Who chose that they be born in a continent of whichever type. So what am I trying to do with the abstract ones that we come closer to? That there is a sense in which sometimes the antecedent conditions, some of them outside of our control, you don't choose your genes. You're born with them. Maybe now you can do genetic engineering if it succeeds at all to change, but at birth you are given. So there is a sense in which our choices, just in case mommy and daddy had certain conditions, you can inherit it outside of your choice, and that can inspire what you do and what you can do. You're a swimmer, whether you can attend school without having to remain on hospital bed for weeks, whatever. You could be inspired by such practice outside of you. Whether you be a demented, unhappy, frustrated lady could have heavy causal influence from antecedent conditions. In case you were raped during your childhood, very unpleasant examples, but very, very practical. We want to address them. If someone was raped by the trusted person, like a father or an uncle, a brother, consistently for a while, it could form a personality that can influence choices, attitudes, character, affect social status and what have you, consequently. Therefore, what? Therefore, when the free willist also makes it look like our choices are free always, it might be an extreme case that is being made. We have to see, therefore, how to navigate our seemingly determined choices, which at the same time seem to be as a result of free choice. There is a navigation that has to go on, and we have to take every case by itself, knowing the potential extent. Why are we speaking this way? Because we are looking at the discussion in the context of moral responsibility, not just in abstraction, doing philosophy in abstraction, but if we were contending on who is free, who acted freely or whose actions were determined by conditions outside of his or her control that couldn't have been otherwise. Now, what is the implication for morality? That is the focus of our discussion. I want to keep it there. Okay. Now, one key thing that I think is a strong case for those who say that, look, our will was free, so we can hold people accountable, is the notion of regret. If people regret, I'm teaching with a slide, so you want to keep looking. If people regret their actions, then it suggests that they admit that they could have done differently. Why did I even come for this party? That is regret. It means you could have chosen otherwise. If so, then we can hold you accountable. No matter the compulsion or the options or the conditions that propelled you into making this choice. As soon as there is the element of regret, the possibility of regretting actions, say, if I stayed at home and didn't attend this party, or if these girls didn't attend this party, this unfortunate thing wouldn't have happened, something like that. That suggests that it wasn't a deterministic condition in the sense of it being impossible for them to say, we won't go. They could have chosen not to go. Okay, so regret. Let me read this last slide and then we are done. Determinists must not regret that now when you look closely at some other content, there is fatalism. I wish I don't want this to be too long. We can discuss that in class. There's fatalism. That is not determinism. Okay, fatalistic pushing means that what will be. You couldn't have done anything about it. No, this one we are saying that if the conditions prevail, then it will lead to this. It means that if you don't want that effect to come, as the determinists argue, then don't allow the prevailing conditions to be present, because if they are there, they will determine the effect. You see, that is relatively safer than saying that nothing can stop it. That's fatalistic. Fatal. You don't want to do anything about it. You just say, and sometimes religious folks are fatalistic and they make it look like it is deterministic, whatever. So some conclusions. Determinism may be impractical. Why? Because morality is a fact of life in every human society. That is what holds society together. There are do's and don'ts. There are praises and blames that we ascribe to our actions to help us run society ourselves. It is factual. Without it, nothing will be right, nothing will be wrong. There will be no meaning to anything. You couldn't choose anything, just sit. What will be, no. Or better still, as soon as the conditions prevail, that's the fatalism. Right? As soon as the conclusion, the antecedent conditions prevail, you expect that it will lead to a certain, because it might not. Look at the physicalists and the critique by them. Maybe in class, can discuss that. Okay. So determinism may be impractical. You can be an avowed determinist in the sense portrayed a moment ago, okay, by book, but in practice, someone gets up and gives you a slap at lecture hall, time. And when you say, oh, Charlie, why you slap me like that? You say, oh, don't worry, it was determined to be so. Antecedent conditions constant. Really? Then there will be chaos in society. Okay. Yet, free will is also obscure. It's pretending. The free willist argument pretends that we don't have any factor that is inspiring our will. The will may not necessarily be acting freely. There may be conditions like the bridling our choices and our actions, controlling it, so to speak. So it might not be free will, sir. How then do we navigate the two? What do you think? And where do you stand? I picked this from somewhere online. Life is like a game of bridge. The hand you are dealt with represents determinism. The way you play it is free will. Maybe two sides of the same coin. Maybe much ado about nothing. Reflect on them. We'll talk some more. I wish you well. All the best.